Alright, Peace and Greetings YouTubers. So the New Edition story part 3, let me just go ahead and say I really enjoyed this entire series. It was really well put together, it was polished, the music was right, the singing was excellent by the members of the cast that were doing the singing, the choreography was together, the visuals, the music video, everything they did, it was so well put together. And you could tell that it was authentic. You could tell that, you know, the members had a say in what was going on. It wasn't something just thrown together. It wasn't just rushed. And I think it's important that we continue to tell these narratives of those in our, you know, in our culture that have done these different things in the past. Because sometimes I feel like our current generation is so instant that we kind of erase the legacies of things that have happened in the past, and we kind of forget about how things used to be, and we're also dismissive of things we weren't around for. It's something, you know, that's something I noticed. I remember when I was in like middle school and elementary, we still kind of kept up with what was going on with acts and stuff that came out 20 and 30 years before we could remember, and we still were familiar with what our parents listened to. I don't see it as much with, like, just me by my experience working with like teenagers and stuff. They don't give a fuck. Like, they don't care. They're into whatever they got going, and that's it. And so sometimes I feel like acts like New Edition and a lot of other people, their stories are forgotten by the up and coming generations. And so I think these series and these kind of movies and things like that, they do a great job of keeping those legacies alive. So, you know, the same way like the Jackson 5 American Dream was my introduction to like the Jacksons as far as a whole, because at the time when I was little, I just knew Michael and Janet. I didn't know there were other siblings and stuff like that. You know, stuff like that, it keeps people's legacy going. Same thing with like a Tina Turner or a Ray Charles. Every time they're making these biopics and series, it's a way to keep the story going and keep people remembering the music, because, you know, music is timeless. So I really enjoyed this overall, but going into the episode, I didn't realize they dealt with so much stuff. I was like, this is why I would have had to be sold. Like, I know for sure, if I was ever in a boy band, if I was not lead singer or at least second lead vocalist like Kelly Rowland, man, you better have 8, 9 of the side hustles, because you know eventually the group is going to end, and if you don't have it together, it's over for you. Like, and they were skating as far as keeping their stuff together. I would have been pissed if I was in that group, especially if I was like Johnny Gill, because Johnny had already had a career. And so when he joined the group, and I'm like, he kept pausing his stuff to try to come to the group, and then something would happen, I would have been pissed. Like, listen, I just came off my album with my and everything. I'm not doing this with y'all today. Same thing with Ralph. Now it makes sense why he was frustrated in the second episode, and he was like, you know, I just want to do this, and, you know, I got to keep stopping everything I'm doing. Like, they had so many problems in the fighting, and I had no idea that Ricky Bell had a substance abuse problem. I was like, dang. You know, everybody, we always just blame Bobby for everything. But I was like, okay, well, Ricky Bell was high too. But goodness, it was crazy. But it also gave me a newfound respect for them, though, because it's like they dealt with all that, and they're still, you know, they're all still here. They're still touring. They're doing, I think they just did Essence Festival not too long ago. Like, they're still doing it. So, you know, much respect to the effort and the hustle and just the loyalty they have to each other. Because a lot of the stuff that they've done to each other and the experiences that they've had, some stuff like that would end friendships, and somehow they still kind of kick it. So that's cool. I like that this episode specifically put a lot of emphasis on the music and like the visuals. So they did lots of, you know, replicas or duplicates of the music videos. You know, they redid the If It Isn't Love video, and they had that video down to a T. Like, they even had the Asian girl in it. I was like, okay, all right. I mean, everything from the costuming, it was right on point. So that was cool. They did Bobby Brown's Every Little Step I Take. That one was okay. They did Poison. Poison came out a little... The vocal I didn't care for, Ronnie's vocal. I was like, yeah, I could have fixed that a little bit, but it was cool. I think the best visuals they had was the Johnny Gill one for My and Ralph Tresvant's Sensitivity. I think those ones were the most realistic to kind of see, which was kind of cool. And, you know, they had a performance of Not My Kind of Girl, and the climax performance at the end, that is what kind of made the movie, I think, because there was a minute where it got kind of dry the last 40 minutes. There was a 20-minute section where it was kind of just, and it didn't help that BET kept going to commercial every 5 seconds. Like, they'd be mid-word, this commercial break. I'm like, damn, how many commercials we gonna have? I know they got a big budget, they gotta pay for this somehow, but Lord, commercial after commercial. So it was good that they had that climax at the end. If I did have one thing I wish they could have probably done, is maybe just scratch the surface a bit on what happened between like 1991 and 96. They did talk about, you know, that they had all came out with additional projects that did do well, it would have kind of been cool just to show a little bit of that. I understand it's more so the focus is New Edition and not all of the solo projects, but it's interesting when you look at all of those additional projects that came that we didn't really remember or that didn't do as well. So, you know, they all were successful initially with their solo projects, and then Velvet DeVoe came out with Hootie Mac, which was the second album, but it didn't do as well as the first one. And Bobby Brown came out with the Bobby album, which was one of my favorite albums from when I was little. But it didn't do as well as Don't Be Cruel, and at the time, The Bodyguard was out, so he was in Whitney's shadow the whole time. And then Ralph Tresvant came out with a second project in like 93, 94 that nobody seems to remember, except for me. I don't know why, but Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis did some great tracks with that one as well. And Johnny Gill came out with a project, and it didn't do as well. And I think what happened was, I think people forgot, and if you follow my R&B is Dead series, I talk about this, but like a lot of people got swallowed into New Jack Swing, and they weren't able to climb out of it. And so pretty much all of them released those second and third and fourth projects between like late 92, early 94, which is around the same time period that New Jack Swing had died and was transitioning. And so a lot of them had recorded earlier music, and by the time it came out, their sound was dated. So I think that happened with Velvet DeVoe's second project. That definitely happened with Johnny Gill's that wasn't his second project, but that was the second project after New Edition, I'll say that. Because he had a single called The Floor, which was a great New Jack Swing song, but the problem was they released it and it was almost 1994, and so the sound was dated. And if you remember, by the time we got to 94, you had songs like TLC Creep Out, and so things were smoother, more laid back, and Babyface had did This Is For Cooling You, so people weren't really, you know, they weren't doing that as much anymore. And so I think that messed him up. Same thing for Ralph. And I noticed that's also a time period where a lot of people who came out with albums, they were remixing all of their singles to make them sound a little bit more current, so they didn't sound too much like what New Jack was doing earlier. So like Bobby did that with the Something in Common single. Like if you remember, that's the one with Whitney. If you watch the video version is very different than the actual single. Same with, I mean, a lot of people were doing that. I think TLC did that with Hat to the Back. I think Toni Braxton did that with I Belong to You, even though they didn't push the full single. Like a lot of people were remixing their singles to kind of keep current with the time. So those artists who had a project that came out in late 92 and 93, and they were still promoting it in 94. Those 94 singles, they were remixing them things to keep them, you know, relevant. But anyway, back to the topic at hand, because I'm ranting. The Home Again tour, that was entertaining to watch. It's a good thing social media wasn't out back in the day, because man, can you picture Periscope and Facebook Live and Twitter and Snapchat catching all them fights and everything that they had going? Because they stayed fighting about everything. That was it. I mean, y'all shooting and everything? Really? Somebody said that the dude that shot the gun was supposed to be Suge Knight, because Suge Knight used to be Bobby's bodyguard back in like the late 80s. I don't know if that's true or not, but that might be interesting. Somebody look that up. What else? I mean, that was pretty much the movie. It was interesting to kind of just see how everything came together and how they kind of got back together just based on the fact that Ronnie was getting married, and that's what brought them together. That was kind of interesting. I would like to see more of these series be done with other artists. I really think it would be cool to see a Jodeci one. I think it would be cool to see like an Invo one maybe, or SWV. Like, you know, just a lot of the people from earlier. But overall, excellent project. I hope it definitely should get some kind of Emmy recognition. There should be some kind of Emmy nominations coming, because this was very well put together and polished. And listen, y'all had me pause on Scandal and How to Get Away with Murder and Grey's Anatomy to watch this. So even though Grey's comes on an hour earlier, it don't matter. I don't care. It's part of this argument. So very, very well put together project. Velvet DeVoe actually just dropped a project as well too, so you can actually buy that on iTunes if you're interested. Anyway, I'm out. Subscribe, share your 2 cents.